morning. In today's passage from the book of Acts, we have the duo who will travel together for some time in this book, Barnabas and Saul, now called Paul. And I want to help you notice something in this text that I've pointed out several times in previous passages, and that is what people are doing when the Spirit begins to speak to them. This, of course, is the commissioning and the call of Paul and Barnabas. And it says in verse 2, while they were worshiping the Lord and fasting, the Holy Spirit said, "Set apart for me Barnabas and Saul." The Spirit speaks to the community, not just to a singular person in the stillness of their own heart, but to the entire community, saying, "Set apart for us Barnabas and Saul for the work that I have called them." And then after fasting and praying, the community laid their hands on them and sent them off. If we expect to hear the Spirit's voice, to feel the Spirit's prompting and guidance of us in this time, I wonder if you might consider what spiritual practices you are engaging in to cultivate that sense of room for the Spirit to move and to speak. We see throughout the book of Acts prayer being one of those practices, worship together being one of those practices, fasting in this text, developing a hunger that emerges into a spiritual form of listening. We even see in a couple of passages, including the one directly before this, sleeping. The angel coming to Peter in his sleep. That also happens throughout the text. So I wonder if we might even consider getting really good rest, a spiritual practice to attune our hearts and ears and minds to the Spirit's work. I hope that in this time you are developing some of your own spiritual practices anew. One of them may very well be this daily reading of the book of Acts, reading the texts that have been called sacred to our Christian community for so many generations, to hear the wisdom that they are speaking to us anew in this time. Now we move on from this passage in the commissioning to the movement of Saul and Barnabas to the proconsul and their confrontation with someone else who is within their own faith tradition, you understand, not an outsider to their faith tradition, but someone who is within their faith tradition, thwarting their ability to fulfill their mission to speak the good news to the Roman proconsul. It is a confrontation with someone in the spiritual tradition that they share about that person's thwarting of the Spirit's movement. Another word that is difficult for us to grapple with, in particular, the way that this passage emerges into blindness for this man, Bar-Jesus. But it is also a word helpful to us to think about how so many times we think about the thwarting of our sharing of the good news of compassion and peace and justice being perpetrated from outside, when in this very passage we see ways that within our own spiritual traditions, our own faith movements, that thwarting can come from within. So a lot for us to deal with today in this very unusual text, and an invitation for us to consider our own spiritual practices in the days to come. And I'm glad we're considering these things together.